So we're 1:40 in the afternoon, so we've been talking about code of conduct stuff. So folks joining us on the video, we kept that private because there were some sensitive topics that come up. One of the things that did come up, and Sarah took an action item around that, was to have some office hours for the steering committee where folks can bring business before the committee. And so we're going to get that scheduled once a month-ish, along with instructions on how people can put stuff on the agenda there and what the schedule looks like. So that's business that we covered up until now. Tim, you had some other stuff that you wanted to cover?
There was one question I sent to the email list. I don't know if I got a response back yet, but it was policy with regards to the life cycle of repositories that we create underneath the Kubernetes SIGs org. And there was it was raised because we wanted, SIG Cluster Lifecycle wanted to sponsor something, but we also wanted to have a potential deprecation policy. And where do those things go? How does it get booted out? Do we have an attic?
We do.
What is the process there? We haven't really talked about it.
We don't have a process, but we do have an attic. The Kubernetes Retired Org is where we moved a few repos. We used to have 3 separate orgs for this, in fact, but we consolidated them. Thank you, Aaron, for consolidating all the different graveyards and retireds and whatever. But now it's, I believe, just Kubernetes Retired. And in the past, it's been pretty obvious, like the old Cube UI and maybe Cube Dash and some other things where there was no activity and no maintainers. We eventually just sent out email to Kubernetes dev and said, hey, does anybody care? And nobody answered, so we moved them. But it would be great if we could use dev stats to monitor activities, so we could say, hey, activity's gone to 0. Maybe we should consider retiring it. For projects that we want to boot out of the project that are still active, that's something that we haven't done before. But I mean, people are free to fork, obviously, under the Apache license.
Also, are there any CLA constraints? People have asked the question. My previous experience tells me that if you have an Apache 2 license, that it shouldn't matter. But there was explicit questions about whether or not there are any CLA constraints for things being moved in. Okay.
No, I asked this question in CNCF legal already. Said, nope, just boot them out. In fact, if we don't want the repo at all anymore, I mean, I was thinking we would move the repo to retired and just tell them to fork it. But if they actually want the issues and everything and we don't actually want it at all, the CNCF says it's fine for us to just give them the whole repo, whole actual repo.
What about like logos and copyright and names and stuff like that? Because ostensibly, when something is part of Kubernetes, Kubernetes owns those trademark-ish type.
They would have to, if they were using trademarks, they would have to change that. Copyright, they preserve the current authors and just add additional.
No, but I'm just thinking like with logos and stuff like that, would we assign those out to somebody who would continue with it? How do we decide who? Is that a steering committee decision?
Good question. No, that's going to be a CNCF legal, I would guess. Okay. And that hasn't happened yet. For the most part, most sub-projects of Kubernetes don't have their own logos. There are a few that do. Like if Cryo was moved out or something like that, that could happen.
And we get to dodge it with Helm since, you know, it's moving from CNCF to CNCF, right? So we don't have to answer that question. Yeah, I think about something like COPS, right? Because like, you know, with you know, Justin at Google, it's not clear, you know, I don't have a good vision or good insight into what the future of that project looks like.
Yeah, I need to go to Cluster Lifecycle. I asked them to put together a vision for where they were going. We need to have some kind of mechanism for a reference implementation for bringing up clusters for E2E tests and things like that.
I agree with that. I mean, that's separable from the sort of like, okay, here's a project that has a lot of users, has a logo, but the amount of folks working on it is sort of like, you know, this is going to put us in an awkward position here, and I'm not sure exactly what the future there looks like.
Yeah, maybe even in preparation for that, I know that in other places, there was like a 2 maintainer, and if you got down to 1 maintainer, there was kind of a warning shot fired.
Yeah.
That said basically like, hey, you need to find somebody else or we're going to take you out, and that might be worth doing too.
Yeah, we have this issue with the Kubernetes dashboard already. I mean, it doesn't have a logo or whatever, but if anybody wants an open source dashboard to use with Minikube or just downloading Kubernetes from GitHub or wherever, I think the dashboard is useful. But most of the partners who are helping with that are no longer helping with that. So there were some people who said they were interested in contributing, so hopefully they will. But that's definitely something. We should identify some metrics that we actually want to monitor from all these repos so that we can keep a pulse on that.
Specifically to the dashboard question, we've also gone and shaken the Angular tree recently to see if we can get people who are interested in helping us do maintenance and get more involved as owners of that.
Okay. Yeah, and to some degree, something that happened with the dashboard also is it kind of reached the MVP level of functionality. It covers the most of the APIs that people use regularly through the UI. So it wasn't clear where they were going beyond that.
So did we decide on an action item? Like it sounded like we need to follow up with creating some metrics around that. Does anybody want to own that?
I think there's a pretty obvious state. I don't know whether or not we want to create a formalized policy, but I do think that we need to probably update the document that was originally merged that outlined Brendan's proposal to have details on retirement. That probably makes sense. I don't know if we want to get to the point of metrics. We maybe say something simple as like 0 to 1 maintainers or something. And eventually over time, we can probably refine it.
I'm happy to add something to that doc if we want to add retirement.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, I'll take that as something for me.
Cool, thanks.
So the only other thing that I had on my list that I was aware of from the emails was Michelle mentioned our backlog needs some grooming. I don't know if that was done or if folks wanted to have a separate little strike force to address that. So every time we come to this meeting, we're starting to like burn through the agenda and the backlog.
Well, I think part of that was moving the backlog to projects. And Phil has some experience with using GitHub projects, so they seem to work fine. Yeah. So,
I like them too. I use GitHub projects in some of my projects.
I think the org level projects have problems, but the repo level ones are fine.
Yeah. Jace offered to move all of that text in our backlog.md file to issues. So I kind of raised that in the email just to make sure everybody's cool with that. If people want to do free work here, I'm not going to say no. And Jace is great. So he offered to do some of that like kind of project management type thing for us. So yeah, he'll move those. I can help him organize the project board, and then we can kind of see what needs to be done after that.
Okay, yeah, the code of conduct related items probably can just be dropped. They're all captured in the code of conduct doc.
Okay.
And that will be actions by the code of conduct committee as opposed to the steering committee.
Okay.
Should I say as an action item maybe by next steering committee, we can kind of like review or execute on pieces of the backlog?
Yeah, that would be, wow, you guys, we're getting somewhere.
So hold on. I would actually give if we're going to use Jace to do a lot of that work, make it a month from now because he's about to move across the country.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be cool too.
Next week he's going to be out.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, that sounds good. But oh my gosh, there's going to be a future in which we will track our backlog, y'all. This is big. Okay. Any other items? There was something that I wanted to bring up and I can't remember what it was. Oh, yeah. We didn't follow up on reviewing charters. Has anybody gotten a chance to review any charters? I know Aaron was going to assign us some. Yeah, Brian?
Oh, yeah, I reviewed some charters. I know the SIGAPS one is, Matt says is ready. But yeah, they're on the order of half a dozen. SIG Architectures is on hold a little bit right now as we try to figure out what the main things SIG Architecture is trying to do are, but and how we want it to be structured. Yeah, I think the SIG node, Derek created the SIG node charter. SIG scalability is out. Contributor experience already merged theirs. So we do have a body to review. There were some issues with the template that I encountered trying to write a charter. There's some language about removing people if they're unavailable for or unresponsive for 3 months or whatever, but it doesn't say how to determine whether they're responsive or what the process is for removing them, like who gets to decide who removes them, things like that. Or there are also some things about if they're not doing their duties, then remove them. And if there were issues that came up like, well, if there are only two, can each one vote the other off the island, right? Like, so there's mechanics questions there that we probably should figure out and fold back into the template.
So Brian, I think I tried to address some of those in the SIG node one actually, because I remember the 3-month one being painful because it basically meant you couldn't take maternity leave, which I thought was not really the greatest way of putting that out there. But yeah, I tried to address some of those in at least the SIG node one. We should maybe want to roll that back in.
Yeah, that's a problem with lazy consensus sorts of things as well. Like we don't want to block all progress, but there's kind of a fear of missing out sort of thing if you can't go on vacation because lazy consensus could happen the week you're gone or whatever. So we need to balance the drive for velocity with the tax on everybody to retain constant vigilance.
Yeah. I had one other minor question, which was, do we have an official stance on sub-projects sponsored by a SIG having their own unique mailing list?
I believe it should be totally fine. They already can have their own Slack channels, but they should be listed in the SIGs.YAML so that they're discoverable.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Because that's, if sub-projects need their own mailing lists, Slack channels, or meetings, then I think that's appropriate. One of the biggest demands we get for additional SIGs is just because people say, well, we want a dedicated forum so we don't have to wade through the traffic.
So, and I mean, my assumption here then also is that it's, the SIG charter could be modified, written such that, powers that the SIG has can be invested into certain folks in leadership position in those sub-projects. And so, like creating new sub-projects, I think it's reasonable to say that, hey, leads of sub-projects can create new sub-projects that are associated with that. This wouldn't be a hierarchy of sub-projects, but yet rather a distribution of powers to be able to create sub-projects.
Maybe I don't know how many sub-projects we're going to have.
Well, I'm thinking honestly around the SIG provider stuff and the discussions that are going on there.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. So as we look to sort of fold SIGs in, it may, as we create sort of conglomerate SIGs, it may make sense to actually, have, more custom charters for those types of structures.
Yeah.
Throwing that out there. All right.
Are we out of topics for today?
We've argued ourselves to death.
Yeah, I don't see anything else on the agenda. Does anybody have any questions or concerns?
Can I just give a brief TLDR of some of the action items?
Yes, please.
All right, so Brendan said he would PR the process doc. Michelle said that she'd sync with Jace, and hopefully we'll have a backlog within a month-ish time frame. And links to the code of conduct document would be helpful in this main thing. And that's about it. There's a lot of other comments in the notes, but there aren't necessarily action items.
I think
And
one action item would be for us all to go look at the charters that exist, so we can just agree on whether we're happy with the charter format and the content that exists, so we can tell other SIGs that this is what we like moving forward.
Yeah, and I had an action item from last week that I didn't complete, which was to define the meta process for reviewing those charters. So I will follow up on that this week. And so everybody has kind of like an outline of what things to look for. We can work on that. And also, please nominate people for the Code of Conduct Committee. Let's give it a week for open nominations, and then we'll vote. Why are you laughing so hard, Clayton?
Sorry, Sarah explained something from a previous chat that I was not paying attention to, where she had told me the acronym RBF, and I had no idea what that meant. So a month later, she explains to me it's resting bitch face. So.
Apologies for interrupting the meeting.
To everyone.
That was on the record. That will be part of the recording.
This is a very serious affair. Everyone needs to know what that acronym is.
Did she say you had an RBF?
It was it's so random. I don't
Okay. All right.
It was about an art project, like seriously, totally unrelated from a month ago, but we haven't chatted in Slack recently.
Okay. I'm glad that could be a part of this recording, though. I'm really excited about that.
I think it brings a certain humanity to our, our council here.
Bye-bye. Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all. Yeah.